Hey, I'm Jessica Shaw. I am a singer ambassador, and today I'm going to show you this really fun upcycle on a quilted jacket. Now, I actually upcycled this from a blanket that I found at the thrift store for like $5, and I'm going to show you how to quickly draft a pattern and sew this quilted jacket. It's super easy and beginner friendly. Let's get started. So to draft the pattern, I'm actually using a button-down shirt that I already owned. I just cut this straight onto the fabric, and I'm starting by cutting the right shirt front piece. As I'm cutting, I'm leaving ½ inch for seam allowance, and at the bottom, I'm gonna leave about 1 inch for hem allowance. Okay, now for the center front opening of the jacket, I'm gonna leave about 2 inches of room, and this is gonna give me enough room later on to fold the fabric in to make a button placket. Okay, now that the right piece is done, I'm gonna get more fabric, lay that down, and cut a symmetrical piece for the left side. And if you notice that armhole looks super wonky, don't worry, I fixed it off camera. I made it a little more curved because that is not an armhole as it is. Okay, now I'm folding some more fabric in half. So now I'm gonna lay down the shirt so that the back side is facing up. I'm gonna line it up on the fold and start cutting. Now this part might be a little hard to see, but I'm cutting it right above where the neckband is, right where the neckband and the collar meet. And of course I'm leaving ½ inch room for seam allowance. And I'm gonna cut enough room to leave a hem at the bottom. Don't worry, I straightened that and lined it up with the front a little bit later. Okay, now I'm creating a yoke piece. So I'm just drawing a line about halfway down the armhole, and I'm gonna cut a straight line. And this separated my back into 2 pieces, creating a cute little yoke. And now I'm gonna cut 2 sleeve pieces. So I'm just laying the sleeve down, and I'm cutting this on the fold at the top, if you notice. I'm gonna leave some room at the bottom for a little hem and ½ inch seam allowance all around. And if you're thinking, Jessica, why is your sleeve so short? You would be right. I definitely cut these a little bit too short, but I still liked the look of it at the end. So I'm cutting both of my sleeve pieces. All right, now I have my 2 sleeve pieces cut, and we're ready to start assembling the jacket. So I'm laying the back piece down, and I'm laying the yoke piece right on top, right sides together, and I'm just gonna pin it all across. Now I'll sew that pinned edge, and I'm using my Singer heavy-duty sewing machine. Okay, now our back piece is done. We can start connecting the 2 front pieces. So I'm laying them down right sides together, and I'm gonna sew them at the shoulder seams, right where those arrows are pointing. All right, we are really speeding through this. Now it's time to attach the sleeves. So I'm gonna lay the jacket out flat, and I'm gonna line the armhole up with the sleeve, and I'm just gonna start pinning it right sides together. And that should be a perfect fit if you did all of your measurements correctly, which I actually didn't show the measurements, but I did this as I was cutting. Something that really helps is folding the sleeve in half, finding that halfway point, and then lining that up with the seam right there at the shoulder, because you know that's the halfway point. Okay, now I'll go ahead and sew those sleeves on. And for extra detail, just for aesthetic purposes, I did a top stitch on the armhole and along the shoulder seams, and later on the collar as well. And I used some dark green thread just to give me some cute little contrast. And this made it look almost like it was double stitched with like a twin needle. I just love the way it turned out. Okay, we are still connecting the jacket, so I'm laying the back side on top of the 2 front sides, right sides together, and I'm gonna sew down the sleeve and along the side seams, all in 1 simple seam, or I guess 2, 1 on each side. So I'm sewing up the side seam. Once I get to the sleeve, I'm gonna put my needle down using the spinny wheel, lift my presser foot up, pivot my fabric, drop the presser foot, and keep sewing. It's the best pivoting technique for going around corners. Okay, now I'm going to hem the sleeves. So because my sleeves were so baby short, I could only fold them once. So I folded them in by ½ inch and top stitched them down. I'm also gonna top stitch where my button placket will be. So I went ahead and serged that edge and I folded it in by about 2 inches. And then I top stitched it down. And this gave me the look of a button placket, even though probably a facing would have been much more professional. But this worked, and I actually thought the serged edge looked real cool. Okay, time for the collar. This is the fun part. I'm gonna start by measuring my neckline. And just measure from wherever you want the collar to start and end. Mine was about right where my button placket was starting. So take that measurement, add an inch for seam allowance, and then add 3 more inches. And remember that measurement. Mine is 25 inches. So I'm gonna draw a vertical line, 5 inches long by 25 inches wide. And I'm just gonna make a rectangle. And now I'll draw an exact rectangle right below that and cut these pieces out. And this will be our collar. Okay, and remember that first measurement of 22 inches, which was the neckline? I'm gonna half that because my fabric is folded in half, which is 11. And I'm gonna draw a line at 11 inches. And now I'm just gonna cut a slanted line going from the edge to that 11-inch mark. I'm gonna put them right sides together and sew along these 3 edges. Leave that bottom edge open for now. Once that's sewn, I'm gonna take my scissors and just clip the corners. I'm clipping that extra fabric away. And this is gonna help when I go to flip it right side out. It's gonna make those corners not as chunky. Okay, I'm gonna give that a good press. And I'm using this little corner tool and it helps you press out corners. Just like that, I'm getting this nice corner in my collar. I'll give it one more press. And now we can attach it to the jacket. So I'm finding the middle point of my neckline. I'm gonna mark that with a pin. And then I'm gonna find the middle point of my collar and mark that with a pin. And now I'll just match those middle points up and I'm gonna start pinning one side of the collar to my jacket. Right sides together. Once that's pinned, I can sew that pinned edge. You cannot see what I'm sewing, but I promise I'm sewing the pinned edge. And now the collar is half attached. Look how beautiful that looks. When you flip it to the inside, not as beautiful. So we just need to pin that down and sew it. So I'm just kind of pulling it down and folding that raw edge in as I pin. And I'll go ahead and sew that edge. Okay, the collar is done. We are moving on to the pocket. So I'm cutting 2 squares that are about 8 inches by 8 inches. And I also cut 2 little pocket flaps that are about 3.5 inches by 8 inches. Okay, and to prep these pockets, I'm top stitching whatever edges I need to hide the raw edges before I start sewing them down. So I top stitched the 3 edges on the flaps and the top edge of my pockets. Now I'm just gonna fold in the raw edges and start pinning my pockets to the jacket. Then I'm gonna lay the flaps down and pin that raw edge at the bottom there. I'm gonna sew along that raw edge so that they fold down and none of the raw edges are exposed. All right, now I'll just top stitch all of my pockets. And now I'm hemming the bottom of my jacket, and much like the sleeves, I did not leave enough room to hem. So I could only fold it up once, so I serged the edge, folded it up, and top stitched it down. And here's me arranging the buttons on my jacket and grabbing my ruler to make sure they are equidistant from each other. Did you know that's a word? Equidistant. And now I'm taking a ballpoint pen and I'm just marking a little dot where the buttons will go. And I'm gonna mark a dot parallel to that on the other side for the buttonholes. And now I'll use my sewing machine and the buttonhole attachment, and I'm just sewing my buttonholes to my jacket. And last but not least, I'm hand sewing some buttons on. And I'm super happy with how this jacket turned out. Feel free to follow along on my YouTube or Instagram for more sewing inspiration, and thanks for watching.